Okay. Okay, it's working. And now let me share my screen. Just a minute. Okay, it's working. Okay. Okay. So today we have to discuss about how some morphological descriptions could help us to understand how some paleosols evolve through time. We already saw how macromorphological evidence and properties could help us, like color, structure, root distribution. But now we have to discuss how some micromorphological evidence or properties could help us. Okay. And to discuss about micromorphological properties, first of all, we need to make some definitions about some concepts about how could we describe a fin section, okay? And the first concept that we need to define is fabric. And fabric is the spatial organization of the bodies inside the soil. So its size, its abundance, the selection of the material, and how each body, each coarse sand, each particle of clay, each organic particle, it's organized, it's distributed inside the soil, is the fabric. So like when you think about your clothes, okay, my clothes, it's cotton or it's leather, it's any kind of material, it's possess any specific fabric. Soil also possess a specific fabric, and this fabric tell us a lot about how soil evolve through time. This fabric, it's composed by 4 items. The first one, it's the coarse fraction that in the past we call it like skeleton. The coarse fraction, it's essentially composed by the bodies that you can easily see in a microscope. So in general, we call the coarse fraction as sand, gravels, and even silt. But here in a micromorphology, we usually tell or we call them as coarse fraction. Okay, so are that material that we can easily see in a microscope. And we also have the fine fraction. The fine fraction are those particles that we can't see in a microscope. We can't individualize them. We can't see one specific or particular clay fraction, for example. So the clay composes fine fraction. In the past, fine fraction, was called as plasm. We also have those spaces that we call voids. The voids are those spaces between pads, between coarse grains, between fine grains, okay? And we also have the pedofeatures, and the pedofeatures are those bodies that are produced by some specific soil process, and they possess different fabric from those materials. So they possess a specific spatial organization of its materials in comparison with coarse fraction, fine fraction, and voids. It's why we call the sum of the coarse fraction, fine fraction, and voids the ground mass. The ground mass is composed by the coarse fraction, fine fraction, and voids. And the features are a particular and specific part of the fabric. Okay? When we describe fin sections, a lot of people usually gives a lot of importance, a lot of attention to the features, and they usually don't describe the coarse fraction or fine fraction and even the voids. But all these materials, all these topics are very important to be described because they tell us a lot about soil genesis. This is a picture just for show us a microscope, a petrographic microscope that we usually use to describe the fine sections. Okay, it's not so important to describe it particular here. And let us get a deep definition of each one of these topics. And the first one is coarse fraction. The coarse fraction is composed by those grains that are inherited from parent material. So those grains, they express the identity of the parent material, the identity of the parent material. So if I have a soil that evolved from basalt or cave or gneiss or even alluvial sediments, we have a specific coarse fraction that differs from the other parent materials. So each parent material produces one specific coarse fraction. So it's quite important to analyze and describe with a lot of details the coarse fraction, because it tells us a lot about which parent material was referred to produce those soils that we can see in the field. Okay? The coarse fraction, it's composed essentially by primary minerals. So it's composed by quartz, but it's also or can be composed by feldspar, plagioclase, and other minerals. They have a low reactivity because they are very large, so they can't absorb or even absorb any kind of material. They can't migrate very easily, but they can be migrated, they can be moved by some transportation process. And these transportation process could affect the shape, the selection, the size of the material. So it's quite easy to see some layers or horizons of soils that was evolved from aeolian sediments, because aeolian sediments are very good selected. Generally, they are composed by very thin sand grains and well-rounded sand grains. So they have very particular properties that we can differ easily from materials or layers or horizons that was evolved in situ. So the weathering of granite or gneiss in situ produce coarse fraction with some specific properties, like coarse fraction with different size. They can change from very thin silt to very coarse sand or even gravels. So the selection, it's very bad. We have a poor selected coarse fraction. The shape of these materials can be very sharp in comparison with the well-rounded materials that was transported by wind or even water, by rivers, by fluvial process. So the coarse fraction could express very easily geomorphological and geological process. They could express which parent material was wafered to produce soil, and if those materials was transported or not. That's very important to us, because when describing paleosoils, could identify several parent materials in the same soil profile. And we usually can find some layers or horizons that could be moved in the past, could be transported in the past, and some of these horizons could be evolved in situ. The weathering and the pedogenesis, the soil genesis, was in situ in some horizons or layers. And then when we use the micromorphological properties, micromorphological description, we could identify each of these layers and understand better how they was formed in the past. Here are some micro photos that we can see the coarse fractions. To example, here we have a coarse sand grain, okay, of quartz. So it's a quartz grains that compose the sand size, the sand fraction, but here we call them as coarse fraction. And here we can see several other coarse grains. Here and here we have the same image but different colors, because here we have the plain polarized light, and here we have cross polarized light. It's different lights that we can use in micromorphological descriptions to better identify some minerals and some properties, okay? So it's very common to see the same picture, but with different colors, because we're using different techniques to describe and identify the material, okay? Here we can see an image with a lot of coarse grains, sand grains, materials that compose the coarse fraction of a specific soil, okay? Here we can see also other coarse materials, coarse grains, which compose the coarse fraction. These are photomicrographies of sea layer with some feldspars that are being wavering and producing clay. This red and orange layers here are composed by clay that was formed by the weathering of these feldspars. And you can see here that we have a rounded, very a smooth surface, okay, that was formed by the weathering of these materials. But here we can see some coarse grains that present a sharp edge, some sharp edge like here and here, that was produced by physical weathering. So the shape of this coarse fraction could express which kind of weathering we can see in that horizon or layer, that are physical. Is it physical or chemical weathering? And here we can see two pictures of rounded and well-rounded coarse grains. See these ones, the well-rounded coarse grains that show us that the coarse fraction of this horizon was transported by a very distant source. So the material which compose the horizon where we take this picture was formed very far from that soil and was transported by wind or fluvial process by rivers, and now that coarse fraction is there. How can I know if it was an aeolian or a fluvial transport? I just need to check the selection of the material. Fluvial process, they usually can't select so better, too much better as aeolian process. Aeolian process could select better the material, the sand grains, the coarse fraction, and they generally present the same size. So if we have different sizes of the coarse fraction, like, okay, I have very fine sand, coarse sand, we have a different sizes of this coarse fraction. This is not an aeolian process. This is not wind. This probably are fluvial process. And it's very important to check if these coarse grains have some clays in the surface, like this picture. We can see the coarse grain here, and we have a dark layer that's very close to the surface. These are clay coatings. These clay coatings could coat this coarse fraction, these coarse grains, and these usually express some clay migration. So even if I'm talking about or describing a soil that can't see today a specific process of clay migration, in the past, we could relate some clay migration here. This clay migration could be induced by gravity, by water, by variation of moisture, by very expensive clays, by the shrinking and swelling process. So the migration of clays could be induced by several properties, and I should use other information to describe or to understand which of them induce the clay migration and the formation of these clay coatings. Okay? The fine fraction, it's also very important to describe thin sections. The fine fraction was produced by chemical weathering, and it's composed by clays, especially by clays. So they generally are composed by secondary minerals. I'm talking generally because some glacial process could also produce clay flexion, even by the physical weathering, but it's a very specific process that we can see only in periglacial or proglacial or glacial areas, so it's not so common, okay? And generally, the fine fraction, it's composed by secondary minerals, clay minerals that was produced by chemical weathering. These clay minerals are highly reactivity because they have a high specific surface, because they are very, very small, so they can adsorb and absorb materials. They can migrate through the soil according to temperature or water or concentration of salts or any kind of material. So they could produce a specific variation in the soil. And they generally compose pads or aggregates. So here we can see two pictures, and with this rounded quartz grains that compose the coarse fraction, and we can see some quartz grains here too that's not so well rounded. But here, this dark color, it's related to fine fraction. And it's very important that if I compare this picture and this picture, I can see the same color of this fine fraction here. And if the fine fraction have the same color in the PPL and the XPL, tell us that this fine fraction, it's composed by iron oxides or manganese oxides and or soil organic matter. So this fine fraction could be rich in soil organic matter or can be rich in iron oxides and iron or manganese oxides. Okay. There was other option too. Generally, clays that are not well oriented, they are mixed, they present a random selection, a random distribution. They did not present different colors in the XPL. So if the fine fraction has the same color in the PPL and XPL, tell us, okay, maybe this fine fraction, it's sun rich, soil organic matter rich, or it's rich on iron or manganese oxides, or only they are not well selected. The distribution of these clays is random. Okay, I'm telling this because some specific process that I will show you in this next slides could select or organize this clay minerals, could organize the fine fraction. And in this case is when clay fraction, when the fine fraction, it's well organized, it possesses a different color in the XPL. So we'll see this in the next slides. Here we can see some pictures of a dark red color of this clay minerals that compose the fine fraction. And here they compose some aggregates, some pads. Here we can also see these materials, and these white areas are only voids. We can see different kind of voids, these well-shaped voids, these planar voids, some circular voids here, but we can see here this material that we can't identify in a specific particle. It's just a mass of material. In this case is the fine fraction. It's different from, for example, this dark material that we can easily see its boundaries. So this is a coarse fraction, and this is the fine fraction. Beyond the coarse fraction and the fine fraction, the description of voids, it's also quite important, because the voids could be filled by water, air, and solid particles. So we can find water, we can find gas, or we can even find some excrements or clays inside those voids, and tell us a lot, because they could preserve, they could store a lot of material and information that could be very useful to us to describe evolution of the soil. Okay. Specific topic that's very important when we are describing fin sections is that the shape of the voids express genesis, express how those voids were formed. So I can understand very easily the shape of the void, and when I describe the shape of the void, I can understand which process created those voids. The voids could be full, or they can be partially full. Okay. It's an example that we can see this white color express the voids. That's called CPV. It's just a type of void, okay, don't worry. And this type of void are formed between the grains that here are aggregates or pads, and coarse material, the coarse fraction. So I can see here that the voids are formed between the aggregates and the coarse fraction. But we can also see voids that are formed between aggregates in this case and present a specific shape. Like I can see here very easily that I have a void between this aggregate and this aggregate, between this pad and this pad. And they have sharp edges, and they present these sharp edges in a perpendicular distribution between them that express shrink and swelling voids. In this case, the expansive clays produce voids when they start to shrink, and the shrinking of this material produce these cracks, and these cracks in this case are planar voids. So the size and the shape of these voids, but specifically the shape of the voids, tell us how they are created. The type of the voids, it's very important. So we should describe and identify the type of the voids. Let's start with vesicular voids. The vesicular are those circular or quite close to circular voids. They could be ovoid voids too. And in this case, they are voids produced by water and gas inside the soil. So if I see this kind of voids in thin section, I can understand that this horizon was or today is submitted by the groundwater influence or by tidal water, or it's underwater today or in the past. So if I found this circular or void kind of voids, I can understand that they was created underwater or under the influence of groundwater, the water table, or tidal water. And the tidal water or the groundwater produce some specific features that are related to gas that's inside those saturated soil. Gas, in this case, is individualized inside the water, and like I can see some bubbles of gas inside a cup of beer or cup of ice. I can see here some bubbles of gas inside the soil. Generally, I only can see this kind of void in clay or loamic materials. So it's not so easy to see vesicular voids in sandy materials, even if they was in the past submitted to groundwater or tidal water influence. But when we have a lot of clay, especially high activity clays, expensive clays, they are very easily to produce this shape, to produce these vesicular voids, because we have specific bubbles of gas, of air that produce this shape, okay? We can see some channels like here, and this kind of channels, they show us the activity of termites, ants, roots. So show us that we have biological activity there. We have a lot of specific micromorphological features that show us biological activity, but this kind of void, it's very important. So even if I found a horizon like 10 meters below the surface, if I found this kind of void, this shape of void, these channels show us that, okay, one day, someday, I was intensive biological activity in this horizon or layer, okay? Maybe in the past, those horizons or the specific horizon was very close or was in the surface, and now it is buried. Okay, so if I found channels, if I found this kind of void, show us intense biological activity and could be related to a surface horizon or close to surface, or a specific kind of vegetation that possess roots in a very deep depth. Okay, so I can understand that, okay, I have a specific kind of vegetation cover that possess roots that explore very deep horizons, and or this horizon was formed in the surface, but now it was buried, okay, by erosion of highlands, and now it was buried. So this kind of shape, this kind of void, this shape of void tell us a lot about the formation of that specific horizon. We also can see some chambers like these ones. Chambers also tell us a lot about biological activity and tell us, again, like the channels, you have, during the formation of this horizon, a lot of biological activity. We can see some, oh, I'm sorry. Someone's just calling me, but I need to, okay, I'm sorry. We can see some chambers here, okay, and here we can see some vugs. These vugs are a specific kind of void that's formed in dense materials, okay? Those vugs are voids that we can't see a connection between them, and they tell us that this horizon, now they are formed in a dense material, and this material was compressed by diagenesis, by the wave of that material, by something. But this horizon was compressed by anything, by a specific material. So if I found those, they are very important to tell us that, okay, this specific depth was compressed. Okay. People, I need to ask you just a moment because someone's calling me and I don't know what is. Maybe it's for my department. Okay, just a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, sorry, girls. Just random calling. Sorry. Okay. So again, if we found vugs, they tell us that a specific horizon was compressed. Okay. It was formed in a low dense material, a low dense horizon, but now the compression of the material increased the density of that horizon and produced vugs. Okay. Here we can see planar voids. They are here planar voids, and these planar voids that we can see very easily because they possess sharp edges and they possess this inclined distribution or this horizontal distribution. They are formed in expensive materials or clay materials that process clay with a high activity, and so they suffer shrinking and swelling and producing these cracks. So if I found this specific shape of horizon, or of void, I'm sorry, in a specific horizon, I can understand that they was formed in a specific horizon that possess a lot of clay, a high amount of clay, and or high activity clay, but beyond this horizon suffer variation of moisture. So in the specific season, this horizon was very moist, it processed a lot of water, and in other season that's get dry. So getting moist and dry during the year, and this variation of moisture produce some vertical and horizontal cracks, some planar voids. Okay. This is a specific kind of void that's not related to biological activity, so express only a chemical and physical process of expansion and contraction of the clays. And we also can find packing voids, and the packing void, they could be called as simple, compound, and complex voids. The packing voids are those voids that are composed only by the packing of materials. And the simple packing voids, they are composed by the packing of the coarse fraction. So how can I say this? As are only coarse grains, sand and gravel grains, and the space between these coarse materials are simple packing voids. So the simple packing voids are those voids that are formed between coarse grains, in this case, coarse fraction. We also can see the compound voids. Oh, here are other example of simple, sorry. Here we can see the compound voids. These compound voids are voids that are formed between aggregates, between pads. So here I can see some space between some pads, some aggregates. So in this case, these voids are compound packing voids because they are formed by the packing of pads of aggregates. It's other example. Oh, sorry. And here we can see some complex packing voids. The complex packing voids are formed by packing of coarse fraction and aggregates, like this dark dots, these dark spots, these dark materials are aggregates, and we have these white bodies that are coarse grains that compose the coarse fraction. So in this case, we have voids that are formed by the packing of pads or aggregates and coarse grains. So we have complex packing voids. These packing voids are the most common type of voids that we can find. Okay, they express an intense bioturbation and especially an intense pedalization, intense production of pads, production of aggregates. So I can see here that I have intense weathering and formation of pads. You can see the same here. And we also can see some moldic voids. The moldic voids are formed by the weathering of primary minerals. So here we have something that was a crystal of olivine, and we can see some spaces here that still these crystals, but we have some white regions, white areas that now are voids, and these voids are formed by the dissolution of olivine, by the dissolution for a specific mineral. So in this case, we have some moldic voids that are those voids formed by the weathering of primary minerals. Okay? It's quite common to see this in poorly bioturbated materials, and it's quite common in sea horizons and sea layers, or even some saprolithic materials, those horizons and or layers that are not well pedalized, that we can see several pads or aggregates, and the voids are only composed by the dissolution of material, mineral material, okay? Without any other specific process like the shrinking, swelling process or the bioturbation. And we also have the pedo features, and the pedo features are distinct bodies that we can see in the fin sections, and these bodies express specific process of pedogenesis, of soil genesis. So these pedo features are different from the core fraction that represents, that express the physical weathering of the parent material. They are different from the fine fraction that express the chemical weathering of the material, of the parent material, and they are different from the voids. And the pedo features also can be defined as the concentration, the impregnation, or depletion of any kind of material. Could be a chemical element or could be a particle, like increase of clay in a specific spot inside the soil could express a pedo feature, and the increase of iron, chemical element in a specific dot, could also express a pedo feature, as well as the depletion of iron and production of a gray spot inside a red or a yellow horizon also can be related or could be described as a pedo feature, okay? We also could see some pedo features that related for a variation of matrix or our organization of the material, so they present a different fabric from the other materials. They possess a specific fabric in comparison with the coarse fraction, the fine fraction, and the voids. And they also could be intrusive. They also could express some introduction of materials inside a specific layer or horizon. Let's see some of them. Okay, this is a specific nodule, is a pedo feature that easily can be seen in a PPL and XPL and express an increase of iron content in comparison with the rest of the fin section or the fabric of that horizon. So I can see here are yellow, light yellow color and this orange or this dark red color here, and express that we have increase of material, in this case iron, that express the formation of a nodule. So in this case, we have an increase of a chemical element, so express a pedo feature. And we can see in the XPL that all this material present a different color in XPL in comparison with PPL. In this specific case, tell us that this fine fraction is well orientated, it's well organized, and it's why we can see easily a different color in XPL in comparison with PPL, okay? We can also see this material, this nodule with an increase of iron and or manganese, probably a lot of manganese in this case, and you can see easily a variation of manganese and iron content in the fabric of the horizon and inside this nodule. And we can see this feature, this nodule, again, that can easily see the variation of chemical composition of the chemical content in comparison with the background, with the fabric of this horizon. And here we also can see, again, another nodule where can see increase of iron and or manganese concentration, and we can see that they usually compose a boundary of void or even some coarse grains. All these nodules or these features are quite different from this example. Here we can see also a material, a distinct body that's quite different from the rest of the fin section. So possess a different fabric which express an increase of iron and or manganese, and this nodule is not related from the rest of the material. So in comparison with this, for example, that I can see inside the nodule some fractions, some material that's composed by the fabric of the fin section, or like here I can see some areas, some spots of this fabric inside the nodule. Here I cannot see this. So I can understand that pedal features could express different processes too, because they could be formed inside that horizon, into that horizon, or they could be formed in other horizon, and they could migrate by erosion, and they could be incorporated into that soil horizon or layer. So how is the boundary of these pedo features? It's very important to understand if they was formed inside into that horizon or layer of, or if they was formed in other horizon, in other layer, in other chemical and physical conditions, and now it's just there because he migrate by erosion, and now it's there. It's not a coarse fraction, it's not a coarse material, although it possesses a huge size, but it's because it possesses a specific fabric that's very different from the rest of the fin section and express a specific soil process that formed this nodule. So if again we see all these pictures, we can see that this picture, this picture, this picture, and this picture, inside the nodule, we can easily see some materials that are related from the rest of the fabric. So all of these pedal features were formed into this horizon. And now they tell us that, okay, if I have a nodule with iron and manganese, with increase of iron and manganese formed in this specific horizon, it seems that this specific horizon and or layer suffer in the past a variation of age, a variation of oxic and redoxic conditions, and they are redoximorphic features. So I can easily see that this specific horizon suffer variation of groundwater or tidal water or was formed in water underwater. But when I sit and think like this, when I see a pedo feature that did not seem to be too related from the rest of the fin section, because it's not related to a specific void, or I can see easily some pieces or spots of materials of this background of this fabric inside the pillar feature, since us that this horizon was not formed by the variation of age, it's not formed by variation of the water table. But where I found this material, where I found the source of this material, okay, I saw this variation of age, but not here. This is just showing us that this specific horizon or layer receive some material from other side, from other area that was transported or eroded up this horizon. We can see some depletion features, some depletion pedo features like these ones that show us a decrease of chemical composition, like this yellow areas, light yellow areas, that's quite different from these dark yellow areas, show us that we have a depletion of chemical material. In a specific case, we have a depletion of iron and also the formation of some crystals inside these voids. The chemical depletion of iron in voids show us that this horizon register in the past or today some specific problems to be drained. So the water that migrates from the surface and achieve this horizon couldn't migrate very easily through the voids, and maybe we have a dense or a reduced porosity inside this horizon, in this horizon, or below this horizon. So water can't migrate very easily and start to reduce iron from iron 3 to iron 2. These other materials also are pedo features. In this case, we have some clay infillings. In these clay infillings, they are fulfilling some voids, and they express clay migration. And they are very important to us because these clay infillings, they tell us that we have a tectonic and climatic stability during the formation of these materials. If we have a void that partially or fully by clay, show us that from specific time, tectonic and climate conditions are the same. They was keep it the same, and they favor the migration of clay from the surface horizons to the subsurface horizon. Okay, now if I analyze the chemical composition of these clay coatings, of these clay infillings, I could understand how was this chemical conditions, how was the chemical weathering that produced these clays. So if I found here a lot of iron and aluminum and silicon, I can understand that I have a very intense weathering that produced iron oxides and kaolinite. But if I found only silicon, aluminum, and some calcium or magnesium, I can understand that I produced 2-to-1 minerals, and so the chemical weathering is not so intense or not so deep, and produced some clay fillings of expensive minerals, expensive clays. So the chemical composition of these clay fillings could be analyzed. We will talk about this in the next class and tell us a lot about the chemical conditions that formed some horizons. Not this specific horizon, because these materials, these pedo features, are formed by clays that was formed in an overlying horizon, but tell us a lot about the chemical condition of the formation of the soils. We will discuss in the next classes too that we could date some of these materials. So if I found here some iron oxides, I could date these materials and know when this tectonic and climate conditions was established and was kept the same through the formation of these clay fillings. Oh, this is very important. When we use the XPL image of these clay fillings, we can see in some cases a different color, like here and here. We can see a different color here, and this light yellow tell us this different color, tell us that this material was well organized. So the clay migration, the clay eluviation was formed, was conducted in a calm conditions, and the clay migrate and
Nadima, the JJ sent me a message telling that the internet connection in the university is not good, so he's waiting to get better.
Okay, no problem. I thought the mistake is from my end. No problem.
Okay, let's wait a little bit.
All right.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry, my connection's not good because it's raining a lot. Just
It's common in the southern.
yes, yes.
Okay. Welcome back,
It's very.
JJ.
Okay. Okay. See here. Okay. Okay. So as I'm telling you, if we found these different colors that are these different colors in these beta features in the XPL show us that the clay fraction, the fine fraction, which compose these beta features are well organized. So the migration of clay was under calm transport, calm conditions, okay, which favor the organization of these clay particles. And these extension lines, these dark lines that we can see here. Oh, I'm sorry. These dark lines that we can see here, and these different colors, this light yellow and light red color, tell us that this material was deposited in calm conditions. So it's very important to us to understand which climatic and tectonic conditions, favor the formation, the deposition of clay into these voids. We can see also the formation of some crystals that infilling the voids, and they very easily could tell us, according to the composition of these crystals, that we have a stagnic property or a glacial property, or some migration of specific chemical elements that induce the crystallization, the precipitation of these crystals. So if they are crystals of calcium carbonate, of sodium chlorate, or any kind of other salt, tell us that, okay, we have a specific chemical condition that favor the precipitation of an evaporite and specific mineral that's related to watering, and now reprecipitation of these ions as salts. We can see in some of these coarse bodies, like here, those films, those clay coatings that I tell you, that tell us that, okay, the clay fraction here migrates through the soil horizons, through the soil. So if I saw coarse fraction, coarse grains that are composed with, that are rounded by clay coatings, tell us that clay migration is occurring or occurred in the past. Okay. Here we have some specific clay coatings rich in calcium carbonate. So tell us a lot about clay migration and clay precipitation of materials, because of course clay coatings that was rich in calcium carbonate is not so common, because calcium carbonate, it's very easily wafered, it's very easily dissolved. So only in specific conditions, generally in semi-arid and arid conditions, we can see calcium carbonate. So if we found calcium carbonate that it's coating on specific coarse fraction, tell us a lot about the chemical condition that favor the formation of this specific horizon. Okay. Here we have some clay coatings partially filling some voids. So here is the void, it's black color here, and here's white. All the voids present this this partner that it's white in PPL and it's black or very dark color in XPL. And here we can see the clay coatings again with a light yellow color and this dark line, this black line that tell us that, okay, the clay coatings here are formed by the migration of clay, and this migration of clay was formed in calm conditions that favor the organization of these clay particles. Here we can see some voids, like here, this white region. It's a planar void, but we can see a dark material here that's coating the void. And when we see this in XPL, we can't see this coating. So just for comparison, here we are seeing some clay coating that is not well organized. So the clay coatings, the clay particles here are not well organized, and the migration and deposition of the clay particles, the fine fraction, it's not in calm conditions and did not allow or did not favor the organization of these clay particles. So they present a dark color and they did not present a different color in XPL. We also can see some crystals of material here, some crystals of calcium carbonate that tell us that we have in a different age, in a different phase of formation of coatings. This void has a coating of a dark, fine material that did not present an interference color, did not present a different color when we see this material in XPL. And we have other phase, an ancient or older phase of coating by calcium carbonate as crystals. So we have different ages, different phases of coating of this void that tell us or show us different phases of chemical conditions. Crystals of calcium carbonate in a first age and a first phase, and a second or newer age, younger age, coating of this dark, fine material, pretty rich in organic matter. Here we can see some clay coatings around voids, and they present a very beautiful color, this very white color that can tell us that clay coatings here is very, very organized. It's well organized. Here we can see this clay coatings, these clay infillings, and here we can see some lines that show us that we have different materials, different minerals that compose this clay pedo feature that's different from here, that we can see only one color. And here we can see several layers of this clay coatings, telling us, showing us that we have different chemical conditions for each layer. And these different chemical conditions could also be related to different ages. So if I analyze the chemical composition and the abundance of clay on each one of these layers, I could understand very well the formation of this soil. Here we can see some specific clay coatings that it's very different from each one. So we have this dark layers and this orange or yellow and red layers. So we can easily see that they have different chemical compositions, but again, they have a light color and a dark line, an extension line, suggesting that the material was deposited in calm conditions, but we have different chemical materials. We have different minerals that was deposited inside this old channel, this old void. Here we can see some crystals partially filling this void. Again, if we found some crystals, we need to know the chemical composition of these crystals, could tell us a lot about the chemical condition. If they are secondary crystals, if they are formed by the weathering, and after that, again, the precipitation of this material, tell us about the chemical condition. If if they are rich in calcium, carbonate calcium, or chloride or sulfate, tell us a lot about the chemical composition. Like in this example, we have a void here that's partially fulfilled by pyrite, frontal pyrite, that are these circular crystals of this dark material that in XPL shiny. So this material are pyrites, and pyrites are composed by iron and sulfur. So tell us a lot that in a specific age and specific chemical conditions, this void, this soil was fulfilled by a water that is rich in sulfite and iron. Sulfite and iron, it's specific found in tidal areas, in tidal sites. So even this soil today, the layer that present this pyrite inside the void, it's very far from the sea, it's very far from the tidal areas. I know that when this horizon was formed, when this void was partially fulfilled, I have the influence of tidal water, because pyrite needs sulfite and iron and high concentration of sulfite and iron in the water. And only tidal water, generally only water of the sea, is rich in sulfur and iron. We have some pedofeatures that it's quite related to biological activity, so tell us a lot about the production of soil by the animals. And we have some infillings of excrements. So we have these excrements that partially fulfill these voids, and they are formed by the action of termites, of ants, and other bugs inside the soil. So even if I found this in a very deep horizon, several meters below the surface, tell us that today or in the past, that horizon was very close to the surface, and the animals work it, leave it there, or in this material was buried, or the ants, the termites, the animals, they are working, they are living in a very deep depth. Okay. Oh, this is other expression of excrements that we can see in voids. And these are some pedofeatures that express some pedotubioles, because they express a different fabric. You can easily see this pedofeature in XPL image, because we have a different color here, but even here we can see a different fabric. So this different fabric of this material show us that something or someone organized this material in a different way from the background, in a different way from the fabric. So this is a pedofeature produced by biological activity. They are generally related to termites. So if I found this kind of pedofeature, I could understand that this horizon or this layer in the past or today favor the action of termites. Okay, if they was formed in the past or today, how can I know that? I only know by dating this material. I can date the organic matter in this material, and now I can understand, okay, I have specific chemical, physical, and climatic conditions that favor the action of termites 10,000 of years before the present, or only they are forming today. We also have some channels that as I said, express the action of the roots, of termites, of ants, but it's quite common to see some pedofeatures created by their reorganization, by a different kind of organization, different kind of matrix of the boundaries of the channel, the boundaries of the void in comparison with the fabric, in comparison with the background of the fin section, in comparison with the rest of the fin section. And when I saw this picture in XPL image, it's very different. Seems like a galaxy, right? It's very, very beautiful. And tell us that here in this area, we have some pressure that favor the organization of clay. So the organization of clay that we can see here with this dark yellow color, and here we can see in this light yellow color, that this organization was produced, was made by biological activity. Could be related to roots or could be related to termites or ants, but it's formed by biological activity. So if I found this kind of channel with this specific pedofeature, I could know that, okay, it was formed by biological activity. Here we have some pedofeatures, some pedotubioles that also express action of biological activity, because we see these layers of material that is organized by animals. Here we can see other pedofeatures that organized was created by animals or roots. And inside all this content of this topic, we always should describe some specific topics of everything, of the coarse fraction, of the pedofeatures, and of the voids. So we should describe the size of this material, the shape of these materials, the abundance of these materials, the frequency and selection of these materials, the color of them. It's very important because it's quite related to chemical conditions and the minerals that we can find there, and the distribution and orientation partners. The distribution orientation partners, they tell us a lot about tectonic and climatic conditions, but especially about tectonic conditions. And to describe this distribution and orientation partner, we need to define two topics, two concepts that are the fabric unit and the partial fabric. The fabric unit is that part, that body that we can see in the fin section. So each coarse grain, each pad, each void, each pedofeature that we can see here is a fabric unit. So each body that can see individualized in the fin section is a fabric unit. And when I compare these materials, and I see some similarity, when I can see some characteristics or properties that are the same or quite the same, I can make some groups. I can cluster these fabric units as a part of a fabric or a partial fabric. So if I compare these aggregates and see, okay, they have similar size, color, shape, so I can group them as a specific group. So this specific group is a partial fabric. So the partial fabric, it's composed by fabric units that possess similar characteristics. And I can compare fraction, like the fine fraction could be a partial fabric. The coarse fraction could be a partial fabric. Voids could be a partial fabric, but a specific type of void also can be a partial fabric. For example, planar voids are specific fabrics, a partial fabric, and they differ from packing voids. If I found in the same thin section, like in this picture, I can see some channels here. These channels are on a specific partial fabric, and they are different from the packing voids, those voids that are formed between the pads, the aggregates, and or between the coarse material, the coarse fraction. So the packing voids is in a specific partial fabric, and the channels are on a specific fabric, a specific partial fabric. So the partial fabric could be very general when we have very broad boundaries, but we also can bring very specific and rigid boundaries according its properties, and we can cluster some fabric units according its structure, shape, color, size, and other properties. Okay? Using these two concepts, we need to understand, and we could understand how these fabric units and partial fabric could be organized and oriented inside the thin sections. We have three different partners of distribution and orientation. We have the basic partner that's related to a specific fabric unit. So the basic distribution and the basic orientation, it's how a specific fabric unit is distributed or orientated. But I need to compare one fabric unit with other fabric unit that compose the same partial fabric. So, for example, I could compare the distribution of these voids, and I could compare them in a basic distribution because they compose the same partial fabric. They both are voids and they both are channels. So I can compare the distribution and the orientation of these voids because they are different fabric units, but they compose the same partial fabric. Okay? I can compare, for example, the distribution and orientation of these coarse grains because they have similar sizes, similar shapes, and they are composing the same partial fabric. But I cannot compare this coarse material with this coarser fabric with this finer material because they have very different sizes. So I can't compare the distribution of this specific coarse grain with this coarse grains because they did not compose the same partial fabric. So again, the basic partner is a comparison between fabric units that compose the same partial fabric. Okay, Let's see the basic distribution partners, or how some fabric units could be distributed inside these fin sections, and they be clustered like in this picture that I show in the past. In this picture, we can see some experiments that are clustered, so they are very close to each one, and we can usually see these materials very close. So each excrement is a fabric unit, but they are composing the same partial fabric that are excrements inside voids. And these excrements inside voids, they are distributed in a cluster way. We also can see a linear basic distribution, like in this picture. We can see that these coarse fragments, these dark coarse fragments, they are distributed in a linear way in comparison with those ones. So we can see these linear layers of coarse dark material, okay? And this tells us a lot about the sedimentation and the orientation of the material. If the distribution of this material, it's so easy to see, maybe this material was selected by density in a calm environment, in a calm site, in a calm agent of transportation. We can see some banded distributions, like in this one, or even in this one. So we can see the fine fraction occurring as banded distribution. So all the material, it's self-mushed. They are very close, but they did not form some groups. They form bands. So I can see in this case a banded shape. You can see a fan-like distribution, like in these crystals of calcium sulfate. We can see the interlaced voids, in this case, the planar voids. They intersect each one. And we can see some random, we can see some random partner that show us that we don't have any specific distribution or organization of these materials. So in this case, these crystals, these coarse crystals, they are randomly distributed. Generally, randomly distribution tell us that this material was not selected or was not good selected. Okay, so if they was transported by some geomorphological agents that did not or could not select very good material, very well the material, like glaciers or rivers, okay? Or all this coarse material did not was transported. They just was formed in situ and are inside those horizons. We also can describe the orientation of these materials, and the orientation is very easily because they are only two types of orientations. So they could parallel or random distribution. So in this case, we can see the fine fraction that's parallel for each layer. So they present this light color, light yellow color, or a random distribution. Like in this case, I can see these crystals that are not orientated from each one. And we have some referent partners. They are very important to the description of some paleosols because the referent partners are related to a partial fabric, the distribution, and orientation of a partial fabric related or referred, especially referred to a specific line for a specific reference. So, for example, I can compare the distribution of a specific partial fabric with the surface of soil or with the boundary between two horizons. So I can compare the distribution and the orientation of a specific partial fabric with a specific limit, a specific boundary. For example, surface of the soil. And we have different reference distribution partners. They are very important to us. We can see the perpendicular. In this case, we can easily see the boundary between these horizons because we have different colors, but we have these voids, these planar voids that intersect, that they are perpendicular. Then they form a sharp angle with the distribution of these horizons. We can see in this case this clay coatings, this clay film that's parallel, this horizontal distribution with the surface of this horizon. We can see an inclined distribution. Like in this case, we can see this clay coatings, these clay films, this transition between these horizons, and they are not parallel to this boundary. In this case, this boundary, it's inclined with this horizons or these boundaries. So tell us that in this specific case, we have a tectonic change of the deposition, a tectonic change of the situation that create this this inclined distribution of the material in comparison with this horizontal layers, okay? Here we also can see this, we can see an inclined distribution of these layers in comparison with the surface of the soil or in comparison with these horizontal layers below. We also can see this radial distribution of these materials. That is a fan-like distribution. We also can see these concentric distributions, like in this picture. We can easily see a concentric distribution forming these nodules. We can see this crescent-like material that we can see some layers very easily, but they did not form a concentric shape. And of course, we can see a random distribution, like these fragments of rocks are randomly distributed according with the surface of the soil or the boundary of this horizon. And we also, and the most common related partner is the related distribution partner that compare two partial fabrics, the coarse fraction and the fine fraction. So in this case, the coarse fraction is a partial fabric and the fine fraction is other partial fabric, and I could compare they both, and now I could compare the abundance and the distribution of the coarse fraction and the fine fraction. We call this related distribution only as CF ratio. So the CF ratio is the distribution of the coarse fraction and fine fraction into the thin sections. We have 5 specific related distributions, and they are very easy to understand and they express a lot about the soil formation. We have the monic, and the monic distribution tell us that we have only one of these 2 partial fractions. So I only have the coarse fraction, the coarse partial fabric, or I only have the fine fabric, the fine partial fabric, or the fine fraction. Okay, so I have the fine, monic fine, that it's only composed by the fine fraction. Like in this picture, I can't see any coarse fragment, any coarse fraction, any crystal of a specific coarse material. I only can see pads or aggregates composed by the fine fraction. So in this case, I have a fine monic CF ratio. And here I can see only coarse materials, and I can't see any kind of fine material, a fine partial fabric. So in this case, I have a coarse monic CF ratio, okay? Of course, if I have a fine monic CF ratio, I should understand that this horizon or layer is formed by the weathering of mafic materials or specific parent material that it's very easily weathered in tropical and wet conditions. And I did not receive any kind of felsic material. I did not receive any kind of material or sediments that was eroded from other rocks. So I have a specific material produced by a specific parent material. In this case, it's also hard to find coarse monic CF ratio, but tell us that this horizon or layer was formed by the weathering of a very felsic material composed by highly resistant minerals or formed by an intense weathering that destroy all the clays and only the coarse fragments still survive and we can be found in that horizon. Okay, so I only can found the monic, coarse monic CF ratio in soils formed by quartzites or something like that, but they are formed by quartzites, not feldspar or biotite or muscovite quartzites. They are only formed by quartz. We also have the giffuric CF ratio. The giffuric CF ratio could be concave or convex because they are organizations that express coarse grains like these ones that are linked by a clay coating, like in these cases. So you can see here a coarse grain, here another coarse grain, and between them I can see a clay coating linking they both. And I call a concave giffuric CF ratio because this clay coatings, they form concave or convex links of course, the concave coatings are most common way to find this gifferic, but sometimes I can find the both or the convex. This kind of CF ratio tell us that this horizon or this layer has what we call empty features that show us that clay is moving, it's being losing by migration, and or the clay are being destroying by hydrolysis or ferrolysis or iron hydrolysis, I'm sorry. The hydrolysis by iron, the changing of iron 2, iron 3, and producing of acid. And this changing also could destroy clay. So the gifferic CF ratio, it's quite related to horizons or layers that are losing or lose it in the past clay by migration or by chemical weathering, by chemical destruction. Okay, so tell us that this specific horizon was or had in the past a clay content that's higher than in the present, but the reduction of the clay content is related to migration of clay or destruction of clay. You also can find the chitonic, and the chitonic CF ratio is this shape. We see an organization of the coarse grains with clay coatings surrounding the coarse bodies. So we can see the coarse fragments, the coarse grains with a clay coating surrounding all the coarse fragments. The chitonic CF ratio tell us that this horizon or this layer are increasing the clay coating by clay migration. So the gifferic CF ratio show us that that horizon is losing clay, and the chitonic CF ratio show us that this horizon or layer is receiving clay, okay, by clay migration. We also can find the enaulic CF ratio. The enaulic CF ratio is related to different types. So we have several types of enaulic CF ratio, but the enaulic CF ratio could be defined as a distribution of coarse bodies, coarse fragments, and fine materials. But here the fine materials, they are composing aggregates. So in this case, I can see coarse fragments and fine material composing aggregates, composing pads. So I can see a specific distribution of the fine fraction. It's not linking coarse grains, it's not surrounding coarse grains, it's composing pads, it's composing aggregates, and I can also find this coarse grains. This kind of CF ratio, it's quite common in soils, well-developed soils, that's formed by intense biological activity, okay? And we can distinguish this kind of CF ratio in different types according the distance of the coarse grains of the coarse fraction. We can also distinguish this kind of CF ratio according to comparison between the size of the aggregates and the size of the coarse fraction. And we also can describe the Zenaulic CF ratio according to the shape of the pads, if they present a rounded or subangular shape, and how is its face, its rugged or smooth face. Okay. Generally, we describe the Zenaulic CF ratio according to the distance between the coarse fraction. And they change, they vary from close to open. So here I can see a closed Zenaulic CF ratio because the coarse bodies touch itself. Touch other coarse grains. So this coarse grains touch other coarse grain, and this touch other. So they are very dense. We have a dense distribution of coarse grains, and they all touch other coarse grain. Here we have a single spaced Zenaulic. When these coarse grains, they are not touching others, but they are very close. They are in a distance below the median size, the half of the median size of a coarse grain. So I need to measure the size of all the coarse grains, and I need to calculate the median size of these coarse grains, and I need to calculate the distance between these coarse grains. And if the distance is below the median, the half of the median size, they are single-spaced Zenaulic CF ratio. It could be defined as double-spaced Zenaulic if they have a distance between the coarse fraction, the coarse grains, that's higher than half and less than one size of the coarse grain. So, okay, the coarse grain have in mean coarse grain size, it's 2 millimeters. The distance between them, it's more than 1 and less than 2 millimeters. So it's more than half of the size, but it's less than the size, the median size of the coarse grains. So it's a double-spaced Zenaulic CF ratio. And if the distance between this coarse grain it's higher than 1, the mean size of these coarse grains, so we have an open Zenaulic CF ratio. We also have the CF related distribution, that's porphyric, and the porphyric have a specific distribution, specific specification that's quite close to Zenaulic. It's also closed open. And the porphyric CF related distribution, it's like the porphyric rocks. We have a fine fraction that dominates the thin section, but we can see here some coarse grains immersed in a fine fraction. So we have a dominance of a fine fraction, and we can see some coarse grains inside immersed this fine mass, okay? So here in this case, we have a closed porphyric when we have these coarse grains touching their neighborhoods. And here we have an open porphyric when we have a mass composed by fine fraction, And we have some spots with coarse materials, but they did not touch then, and they are very far from itself. So in this case, we have an open porphyric CF ratio. Each of these CF ratios tell us about some specific conditions. Like the Naulic tell us about intense pedalization and bioturbation, and the porphyric tell us that we have clayic materials with low bioturbation and probably dense materials, okay? Okay, people, do you have any doubt? Anything that you want to ask about micromorphology, and how can we use micromorphology to identify some process in paleosols?
For now, it's good. It's okay.
Okay, okay.
So,
Okay,
JJ, I will need to rewatch the whole thing again to have better understanding. Maybe next class.
okay, okay. And don't forget to read the reference that I share with you. I know that's a lot of information, but helps a lot if you read the reference that I share with you, okay? And the material is there in the Google Classroom, so I think that will help a lot, but of course you can watch again the record, is not a problem. And if you have any doubt, just send me an email, okay?
Okay.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
So people, see you in the next week. I will share the reference about the geochemical analysis, and we will talk about some geochemical analysis that could help us to understand how some paleosols could be formed in the past. Okay?
All right.
Okay. So see you. Bye-bye.
See you
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye.